Greetings and salutations, young true believers. Welcome to Chapter 8, Formal Fallacies and Fallacies of Language. So Moore and Parker begin this chapter. They open it up with 3 formal fallacies. We'll talk about the first one, affirming the consequent. So here's an example. Let's start out with that. If Jane's a member of a sorority and Jane's female, Jane is female, so Jane is a member of sorority. Now, right off the bat, you probably suspect there's something wrong with that argument. Let's go through it again. If Jane is a member of sorority, then Jane is female. Jane is female. Jane is a member of sorority. Part of the problem is that it implies that everyone who's a female is a member of a sorority, but the argument form is something like this. If P, then Q, Q therefore P, right? But that's not a valid argument form. The argument form in this case that would be valid is if P, then Q, P therefore Q, which is known as modus tollens, right? So here's another example of this fallacy. If this dog is pregnant, then it's a female. This dog is female, therefore this dog is pregnant. So again, that's to imply that all female dogs are necessarily pregnant, and that obviously does not follow, right? Denying the antecedent. So let's talk about these terms. A conditional statement, if P then Q. If it's Monday, then you're doing coursework, right? The first part of a conditional statement is known as the antecedent. The second part, the part that follows the if then, is known as the consequent, right? So this next fallacy is denying the antecedent, right? And here's an example of that. If Sandy passed the final, then she passed the course. Sandy did not pass the final, therefore Sandy did not pass the course. Well, again, Sandy might not have had to have taken the final. She might have had enough points. She was able to opt out of it, right? So this argument takes the form, this pseudo argument, because it's a fallacy. If P, then Q, not P, therefore not Q. There is a valid argument form that resembles that. It's modus tollens. If P, then Q, not Q, therefore not P. And we'll be talking a lot about that in the next chapter. The fallacy of the undistributed middle. We're going to be talking a lot about this in the next chapter as well, but here's an example of this fallacy. All cats are mammals, all dogs are mammals, therefore all cats are dogs, right? The fact that cats and dogs are both mammals does not give us any reason to think they're otherwise related, right? Here's a slightly more involved example. The sniper had to be a great shot, have access to the roof, have a high-powered rifle and scope, and be able to get through the crowd in the ballroom without being noticed. Aaron is a great shot, had access to the roof, had a high-powered rifle and scope, and was wearing a tuxedo, so he would not have been noticed going through the crowd in the ballroom. Therefore, Aaron was a sniper. The fact that Aaron and the sniper are both great shots, had access, had the right kind of rifle, and could go through the crowd in the ballroom without being noticed does not prove that Aaron is a sniper. This would be what is known as a circumstantial case in legal terms, right? Now, undistributed middle term is going to make a lot more sense next week when we start talking about categorical logic. That's the logic that was invented by Aristotle. You don't need to know the technical details of this particular fallacy. Again, I'm going to go over that next week. All right. The fallacy of equivocation. So, fallacy of equivocation is related to semantic ambiguity, which we covered in Chapter 3. Semantics, remember, is that part of language that refers to vocabulary and meaning, right? So, ambiguous claims can produce a fallacy. Here's the example. All banks are alongside rivers, and the place where I keep my money is a bank. Therefore, the place where I keep my money is alongside a river, right? So, again, there's an equivocation here because the word bank is being used in 2 different senses, and that obviously throws the reader off because you clearly wouldn't keep your money alongside the bank of a river. The fallacy of amphiboly, right? This is related to syntactic ambiguity. You'll recall syntactic ambiguity stems from an ambiguous grammatical structure, right? As an example, if you want to take the motor out of the car, I'll sell it to you cheap. there's a pronoun ambiguity here, which is built into the syntactic ambiguity. You don't know what the seller is offering you, the car or the engine, right? Another example of this: you must show a birth certificate and a driver's license or a passport in order to apply to the program. And the applicant says, all right, I have my passport. And the agent said, and a birth certificate? And the applicant responds, you said, or a passport, and that's what I have. What the agent meant to say was that a birth certificate was required and either a license or a passport, right? So, again, structure matters. Fallacy of composition. The fallacy known as composition occurs when a feature of the parts of something is erroneously attributed to the whole. Here's the example. This building is built from rectangular bricks, therefore it must be rectangular. Clearly, that doesn't follow, right? You can build a triangle or a pyramid-shaped building with rectangular bricks, right? You can build a curved wall with rectangular bricks. Another example of this: the public thinks highly of individual members of Congress, therefore the public thinks highly of Congress as a whole. Well, Congress's approval rating is routinely, in low 20 or high 20s, low 30s. So, no. The fallacy of division. The fallacy of division is the same fallacy as the fallacy of composition, but going in the opposite direction. Here's the example. The Miami Dolphins are the only team that ever went an entire NFL season without a defeat. Clearly, they were the best team in the league that year. That was 1972. Therefore, that year, the team's quarterback, Bob Greasy, was the best in the league at his position, and running back Larry Zonka and wide receiver Mercury Morris likewise were the best at their positions, right? Now, just because the Dolphins team in 72 was undefeated, altered regular season, altered out the playoffs, Super Bowl, does not follow that every member of the team was the best at their position, right? That's the fallacy of division. And one last example of that: during the recent financial recovery, my financial portfolio gained considerably in value. Therefore, Microsoft stock, which is in my portfolio, gained considerably in value. Even though you had an overall increase in value of your stocks, it does not follow that your Microsoft stock went up in value. One more for today, and we'll pick this back up again on Wednesday. Confusing explanations with excuses. All right. So, an explanation is a causal account of how a thing, a phenomenon, right, or a state of affairs came to be. That's, we talked about this when we explained the difference between an explanation and an argument, right? An excuse is an attempt to justify a course of events morally, right? Now, it's a logical fallacy. It's a very common logical fallacy to conflate an explanation with an excuse, right? Warren Parker gave this example. After the September 11, 2001 suicide attacks on the World Trade Center, a speaker at our university, they teach at Chico State, attempted to explain possible causes of the attacks. Some attendees assumed him to be excusing or justifying the attacks. Rush Limbaugh invited him to move to Afghanistan. Right? Here's another example. Speaker: the young man who killed all those kids at Sandy Hook Elementary was suffering from half a dozen mental disorders. And the heckler in the crowd says, oh, so now you're going to tell us he had an excuse for the horrible things he did. There's a difference between an explanation, which again is a causal account of how a state of affairs or a phenomenon came to be, and an explanation, right, which is, again, an attempt to justify the same, right? They are not the same phenomena, so don't mix them up. All right, and I will be back with the remainder of Chapter 8 on Wednesday.